Okay, let's just finish up this stuff for once and for all. Just make a font. Yeah.
What is inside this?
Chicken. It's that meal box.
So should I put it in the fridge?
Yeah. I can't eat it now.
Huh?
I can't eat it now.
I asked that guy, he said restaurant है बहुत delay किया मैंने.
Yeah, I know.
Hello everybody, my name is Markiplier and welcome back.
So the first thing I'm gonna do is Hi Ali. What you doing? Oh yeah, you can send me the common app if you want. I'll check it out in some time. So I need to put the close button on the bottom. Sorry, on the top left, right? So mhm. Yeah, so this becomes cool. So we need to put this on the top left, right? So this close button needs to be -10 from the top and -10 from the left side. There we go. That looks about right. Let's see what this is. And then is a video ad in the bottom right corner. Add a timestamp in the corner like this design. So I need to add a timestamp here. So that's right. So this is gonna be timestamp. Right, and then we're going to see what right, and then so this. Down here actually. There we go. Timestamp, and then so I want the timestamp to be on the bottom right. So that's position is absolute, and then from the bottom I want it to be 10 pixels, and from the right I want it to be 10 pixels. Right, and then I should put that there. That's pretty easy. And you just do some basic padding is 3 pixels on all sides, and then I'm going to put the background color is black and the color is white, and I'm just going to make the opacity 0.8, something like that. Make this 8.9, and I'm gonna just down a little bit because I think that'll look good. Clean soft done. There we go. And what if I just add some pattern or something like this? I think that looks good. Cool. and then okay. Find an image of a clothing online and create the design below. You need a position absolute inside position relative. Set the position relative container to display inline block. Create the design. Okay, let's do this. I'm just gonna let this be over here. And let's just create new. And let's do 50 either HTML, and I can just make the layout and say clothing mockup. And I'm just gonna put it so it's let's just use this. Let's just save images. No, I can't. I want to go to. I'm just gonna save parent directory. Yeah, that looks immense. Alright, so I want to make this a div. I'm gonna call it the container. Right, so in the container, we have an image, dash, and then we got this. So let me see what that looks like. Okay, this is no, it's invisible. Okay, cool. So now I'll make this so the container, I want to make it bigger. Oh, that's 2005. That's good. And then I want the image to class image. And I want this is 20% off. Not bad.
Good.
And then on hover, let's okay, so first we make this. So we need the and then we do position as absolute, and then Ali, Ali, check this out. I made like a container with a product image, and you hover on it and like shows you this. I'm gonna make this. I wanna make this. But I want the opacity to be a little less, so that's. I'm gonna click this 245. Wait, check this out. So, if I do this, and I make this like 0.7, there, check this out. You think that looks good? I think 0.7 looks good. Yeah, and then, wait, let me add some. So if I add some like do 0, 0, 0, and then let me do 0.4 maybe there. Right, and then on hover container hover slash add to cart container. Yeah. No, very much. It's so sunsan. Just let him know. Yeah, full on. बाहर भी कूद कर रहा है. What time would that be? Colon expected. Oops. Right, so then you see how there's a little shadow. So then if I what if I like increase the shadow a little bit, right? So container.hover. That's what happens to the add to cart container. So just on container.hover and colon hover. I want to take this box shadow, and what if I just want to increase this like 7 pixels and this like 7.7. So and then over here we're gonna do transition the box shadow for 100 for 200 milliseconds. Let me make it even it out. I think that's a little too aggressive. I'm just gonna make this 0.5. Yeah, check that out. Wait, check this out though. So right, so now I can just this I can just generate with JavaScript. Now if I just like so some margin of 30 pixels and 50 pixels, not this. But I want these to show on the right side too. Oops. It's 2 pixels. There, check this out. Yeah, check that out. I need to make this into a flex box with resizes. So like, I'm just covering all the space. Yeah, so the reason I gotta make this a flex box is, so if it's going down into this looks odd. Like it looks like it should fit here, but because of the margin it doesn't. So I gotta make this into a flex box so that these three occupy all space. So all of them become bigger, and now it becomes 3 products per row instead of 4. Like this looks like it should be able to occupy the space, but it just doesn't. That's okay though.
In this lesson, we're going to finish our final project. We're going to create the sidebar, we'll resize our video so that it looks like our design here, and lastly, we're going to create the tooltips when we hover over these icons. We'll start off with the sidebar. So I'm going to rearrange my windows here so that it's a little easier to copy. So I put the design on the left, I'm going to put our current sidebar on the right here, and I'll resize my windows so we can see it better. And now we're ready to begin. So let's open our code editor, and we're going to open youtube.html. And then we're going to scroll down to the sidebar code, which is right here. So let's take a look at the design of this sidebar, our reference design. If I hover over it, you can see that it's just a bunch of boxes. And inside each box we have an icon, some text, and they're centered horizontally and vertically. So we're going to start step by step. We're first going to create the box. And let's go into our code, and instead of this text, we're going to create 6 boxes. We're going to use a div to create each box. Let's give this div a class of sidebar-link. And I'm going to copy and paste this 6 times. 4, 5, 6. Next, we're going to style these so that they have the same size as these boxes. We're going to go into our CSS. So let's go into sidebar.css. I'm going to put this on the right side here so we can see it better. And now we're ready to style these. Let's target the class sidebar link. And for each of these, let's give it a background color so that we can see them. And let's set it to light gray. And we'll also give them a height, because without any content in the divs, they have a height of 0. So let's set a height of 50 pixels. And let's save it. And let's see how that looks. Okay, so it's hard to tell the difference between them. So let's add some spacing at the bottom of each div so that we can differentiate them. I'm going to add margin dash bottom of 1 pixel. Save it. Okay, so from this, it looks like our boxes are a little bit too short, so we're going to make them taller. Let's try a height of maybe 75. Okay, so I think that's pretty close. We can get rid of this margin at the bottom and actually increase this to 76 so that we compensate for the margin that we removed. And next, when we look at the design, these boxes are usually white, but when we hover over them, they turn gray. So instead of having this background color gray here, we're just going to set the background color when we hover over this. So let's set a hover style dot sidebar dash link colon hover. And when we hover, we're going to set the background color to light gray. Let's save it. Now when we hover, it's light gray. But our design is actually a lot lighter than that. I'm going to change the color here. I'm going to pick something a little lighter than this. Maybe something here. Let's save that and check it out. And yeah, I think that looks pretty close. Next, we're going to add the content in each of these boxes. So first, we actually need to download all of these icons. So we did it before for these icons. And just a reminder, to do that, we're going to right-click and inspect. So you'll see that this actually covers up the sidebar. What we can do is click these 3 dots in the top right, and then we can move the DevTools to another side of the web page. So I'm going to move it to the right side here. And now we can see the full sidebar. Then we're going to click this in the top left, click one of these icons, and you get the URL to download them here. So hover over this URL, and then click this, and now we can Control S. And I'll save it in the folder that contains my code in the icons folder. So make sure you do this for all 6 of these icons, and I'll see you back after you're done. Each of these, and add our icons. HTML. So let's go into each of these and add our icons. Inside this first div, we're going to add an image element, and we're going to set a source attribute, and we're going to load the icons slash home.svg, because this is the home icon. And let's save it, and now we have our icon. It's a little bit too big, but we're going to resize it after. For now, let's copy this and add the icons for all of these other boxes. So we're going to add, for this one, we're going to add the Explore icon, so explore.svg. And for this one is the subscriptions. And then for this one, it's originals. And then for this one, it's YouTube-music. And the last one is library. I'm going to go down here, change this to library. Perfect. Next, we're going to make these icons smaller. So usually we would set a class on these images so that we can style them with CSS. But for this lesson, I'm going to show you another way that we can target these images. So let's go into our sidebar styles, and we're going to learn a new CSS technique. So we already learned that this text before the brackets here, this tells the computer which elements we're styling. In this case, the dot means we're targeting a class, and we're styling all elements that have the class sidebar link, which are these elements. So this bit of text is called a CSS selector, and there's actually a lot of different selectors that we can use in CSS. So we already learned the class name selector, which looks like this and starts with a dot, and we learned the element name selector, which just starts with the element's name. Another thing we can do with CSS is to combine selectors together. For example, if we said dot sidebar dash link and then wrote a comma, down here we can add another selector. So let's say we also want to target dot header. So now all the styles inside the brackets will target all elements with the sidebar link class and all elements with the header class. This is an example of a more advanced selector. Another selector we can use is, instead of a comma, we can use a space. And then type another selector like image. So when we have a space between these two, this means that we're targeting all images inside all sidebar links. So we're going to target these images inside sidebar links only. We're not going to target all images on the page. So let's style these images and make them smaller. We're going to set a height, and let's try 24 pixels. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so I think that looks pretty close to what we have in the design. Next, we're going to center these horizontally and vertically, and finally add the text. So to center something vertically is actually challenging in CSS. The best way to do it is to use a flexbox. If we look into our code editor and open our flexbox example, so flexbox.html, and then we right click and open with live server, we have a bunch of examples of using flexbox. In the last example here, we're doing vertical alignment. If we scroll down to our example in our HTML, we have this property called align items center. So this vertically centers our content. Here we also have an example of horizontal centering. If we scroll up to that example, which is this one, we have the property justify content center. So using justify content center and align item center, we can put it both horizontally and vertically centered. So let's go back into our project and use a flexbox to center these. We're going to go back to our CSS, and we're going to make each of these sidebar links a flexbox. So let's set the display property to flex. And we're going to set justify dash content to center. So this will center horizontally. Let's save it. Now that horizontally centered. And then align dash items center for vertical centering. So this is coming along great. Next, we're going to add the text. So underneath each of these, let's add a div. Div. So for this first one, it's going to be called home. And I'm just going to copy these and replace it with each of these texts. Explore. This one is subscriptions. Originals. YouTube. Music. And library. Now let's start styling this text a little bit. I'm going to use this advanced CSS selector again. We're going to go into the sidebar link class, and then we're going to target all the divs inside sidebar link. So we're going to target divs. So this is not going to target all divs on the page, only the divs inside sidebar link. Let's change the font here first. So we'll set the font dash family to Roboto, comma Arial, like before. And let's make the text smaller next. We're going to set the font dash size to maybe 12 pixels. Okay, maybe 10 pixels. Save it. And now the next problem we have is that our elements are appearing beside each other, not on top of each other. So why is this happening? So remember that we can set a property called flex-direction:row. If we go into our Flexbox example, flexbox.html, and scroll all the way to the top, this was the first thing that we learned: display flex and flex direction row. So if we open this in our browser and we scroll to the first example, flex direction row causes our elements to be displayed horizontally. So notice that these two are divs, but they're displayed next to each other, not on top of each other. Now to change this, we're actually going to go back and we're going to use flex direction column. So where flex direction row displays them horizontally, flex direction column displays our elements vertically. So we save it. Now it's displaying our elements one on top of each other. So this is another direction that we can use for our flexboxes. By default, flexboxes are flex direction row, so they will appear horizontally, but we can set flex direction column when we don't want that behavior. So for flex direction column, these two properties are actually switched. So if I remove both of them first, and I first use justify dash content :center, save it. Justify content now affects the vertical direction instead of the horizontal direction with flex direction row. And if I use align items center, align items now affects the horizontal direction. So for flex direction column, these two are reversed. It's a little bit confusing, but the more that you use Flexbox, the more you get used to it. Alright, so we're almost done. We're just going to add some space between these two. To add some space, let's add some margin bottom to the image. So margin dash bottom, maybe 4 pixels. Save it. Okay, I think that looks pretty close to me. And it looks like our elements are a little bit too tall. So I'm actually going to scroll up and adjust the height here, maybe 74. Save it. And okay, that looks pretty good. So one last thing with the sidebar is that I noticed in our design, it kind of covers the header while ours does not. So to change that, remember we can change the z-index to be higher than whatever the header is. So if we go into our header styles, header.css, notice that the z-index is 100. So we're going to change our z-index to bigger than that, so 200, save it, and now our sidebar is covering our header. Next, I want to move all of these icons down a little bit more so that it's aligned. So to do that, I'm going to add some padding or spacing to the top of this. So we're going to add some padding, dash top, maybe 5 pixels. See how that looks. Okay, so that looks perfect. And actually one last thing is, I'm going to make the cursor a pointer when we hover over it. So let's go into our sidebar link, and we'll set the cursor to a pointer. Save it, and now this looks good to go. Next, we're going to resize these videos to match the design. So I'm going to move this back into one window, and I'm going to resize this so that we have 3 videos in each row. And now we can properly switch back and forth to compare. So as I switch back and forth between these, you can see that there's a size difference between the videos. So we're going to fix that. So for our website, I noticed that the left edge here can be moved to the right a little more. So if we look at our design, it's more to the right. Go back to our current project, design more to the right. So to move this to the right, we're actually using padding. So we have to increase our padding on the left side of the page. Let's go back into our code, and we're going to find the padding, which is in general.css. Remember, we added padding to the left side of the body. That's what's pushing these elements over here. So let's increase the padding to maybe 96. Save it, and let's compare it to the design. Alright, so I think that looks perfect. And we also have padding on the right, while our website does not. So let's actually also add padding dash right of 24 pixels. So we save that there, and compare it to our design. Our videos are now exactly the right size. So that looks great to me. The next thing we're going to tweak is if we look at our design, the background color here is a light gray, while our background color is white. So we're going to make the background color of our entire page a shade of gray like this. So let's go into our CSS, and in our body styles in general CSS, let's set the background dash color to light gray, and I'm going to hover over this and select a lighter color, maybe 248. Save it, and let's compare it to our design. So this is our website, this is the design. I think that looks pretty close. And the last few details I want to adjust is this part. So if I look at my design and I compare it to my website, it looks like our channel pictures are a little bit too big. So if I look at the design here, we could make them a little smaller. So let's go into our code, and we're going to go into the video styles. Let's open video.css. We're going to find the profile picture. So let's scroll down. So this image here is the channel picture. It has a class of profile picture. We're going to decrease the width to maybe 36. Save it. Compare it to our design. Okay, I think that's the right size. Next, I'm going to adjust some of the spacing here. So if I compare it to the design, there's actually a little bit less spacing. Here, then our website. So I'm going to decrease that thumb to maybe 8 pixels. Pretty happy. And a little bit to 10. Save it and compare it. Okay, so I think that's good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's a little bit off. But I think that our current website here looks really good to me anyways. The final thing we're going to do in this lesson is we're going to create these tooltips when we hover over these icons. So before we learn how to make these appear when we hover over, let's just create these tooltips and place them below each icon. So let's go into our website, and we're going to add some tooltips to these. So we'll go into our code, and I'm going to resize the windows so we can see better. So we're going to go into our HTML, we're going to scroll up to our header, and let's first find the search icon here, which is in the middle section, and then the search button here. So to create the tooltips, we're actually going to use the position property that we learned earlier. So remember that we use position to put this number in the top right corner. We're going to use position to put a tooltip below the element right here. So let's first add a tooltip inside the button. So we're going to create a div, and let's call this search. Save it, and now that's our tooltip. And now we need to position this tooltip relative to our button. So remember from the previous lesson, we need position absolute inside position relative. So let's first add those position properties. So we're going to go into the header CSS file because we're working with the header. So let's open that up. And I'm going to move it to the right side here. And now we're going to scroll down until we find our search button. We're going to scroll, and it's right here. So we're going to set the search button, which is our container, to position :relative. Save it, and nothing happens because that's how position relative works. And now the magic comes when we set this to position absolute. So we're actually going to set a class here so that we can target it a little easier. We're going to call this tooltip. And we're going to use that advanced CSS selector we learned earlier. So we're going to target search-button first, and then we're going to type a space, and then we're going to type .tooltip. So this means that we're targeting the .tooltip class not on the entire page, but only inside the search button. So now we don't have to come up with a unique name for this specific tooltip. So if we save it, we're going to set this to position absolute. And now we have an absolute element inside a relative element. So if we save that, we can start positioning this. Let's give a background color so that we can see it better. So background dash color of maybe gray. And let's set the text color to white. Color :white. Let's give it some padding on the inside. So padding top of maybe 4 pixels. Padding bottom 4 pixels. Padding left 4 pixels, and padding right 4 pixels. Save it. And let's actually increase the padding on the left and right to 8. See how that looks. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. And now I'm going to set some rounded corners. So we don't have to exactly match your design, we can make it close enough. So we can set some rounded corners, border dash radius. 4 pixels. It's a little too much for me. Set to 2 pixels. And I'm also going to make the font a little bit smaller. So I'm going to set the font dash size to 12 pixels. Save it. I think that looks pretty good to me. Next, we're going to use the properties top, bottom, left, and right to position this within the relative element. So for our cases, let's start with bottom 0. So this means that the bottom of our tooltip will be at the bottom of the button. Save. So for our cases, let's start with bottom 0. So this means that the bottom of our tooltip will be at the bottom of the button. I save this, that's exactly what we have. Now to move it even further to the bottom, we're going to use negative pixels. So let's set negative 20. Save it. Okay, so I think that's looking pretty good. Let's increase it a little bit more. Let's increase it to 30 pixels. Save it. Okay, so I'm happy with that position. Now we're going to learn how to make this tooltip appear when we hover over this button. So the trick here is we're going to set the opacity, or how see-through the tooltip is, to 0, which is completely invisible. And then when we hover over this button, we're going to set the opacity to 1. So how do we actually change this when we hover over the button? So we're actually going to use a combination of this advanced CSS selector and pseudo classes, which are like hover. So first, we're going to target the search-button class, and we're going to add a pseudo class :hover. And now we're going to type another selector. We're going to type .tooltip. And I'm going to set some styles here. So what this does is that we're going to target the tooltips only when we're hovering over this search button. So up here, notice that we're targeting the tooltips inside the search button, regardless of whether we're hovering over it or not. In this case, we're going to target all tooltips inside the search button, but only when we hover over it. So when we hover over it, we can set the tooltip opacity to 1. So this is a neat trick that you can do to create tooltips like this. So if we go into our webpage, when I'm not hovering over the button, notice that the opacity is 0, but when I'm hovering over the button, this tooltip will have an opacity of 1, which looks like this. Because we're changing the opacity, we can set a transition. So let's set a transition. We need to tell it what to transition, which is opacity, and how long the transition will take. Let's say 0.15 seconds. Save it, and when we hover over this, now we get our tooltips. Now the last thing I want to show you is if we hover over the actual tooltip, you'll notice that because it's inside this button, when we hover over the tooltip with our mouse, it also counts as hovering over the button. We can fix this by disabling hovers on the tooltip and only allow hovers on the button. So to disable the hover on this tooltip, we're going to use another CSS property called pointer-events:"none." This means that when our mouse hovers over the tooltip, hovers on the tooltip and only allow hovers on the button. So to disable the hover on this tooltip, we're going to use another CSS property called pointer-events:"none." This means that when our mouse hovers over the tooltip, it's not going to do anything. So that's how we create these tooltips on our webpage. Let's do the same thing with this voice search button. We're going to go into our HTML and we're just going to copy this tooltip and just move it down here into the voice thing with this dash that's hovering over again our tooltips. Now the last thing I want to show you is if we hover over the actual tooltip, you'll notice that because it's inside this button, when we hover over the tooltip with our mouse, it also counts as hovering over the button. We can fix this by disabling hovers on the tooltip and only allow hovers on the button. So to disable the hover on this tooltip, we're going to use another CSS property called pointer-events:"none." This means that when our mouse hovers over the tooltip, it's not going to do anything. So that's how we create these tooltips on our webpage. Let's do the same thing with this voice search button. We're going to go into our HTML and we're just going to copy this tooltip and just move it down here into the voice search button. Just like that. And let's change the text to "search with your voice." Save it. And now remember to position this. We're going to have position absolute inside position relative. So let's turn this to position relative first. I'm actually going to make it easier for us. I'm going to first target the search dash button. And I'm going to put this inside here. And I'm also going to target with a comma relative first and position relative. Save it. And now remember to position this. We're going to have position absolute inside position relative. So let's turn this to position relative first. I'm actually going to make it easier for us. I'm going to first target the search dash button. And I'm going to put this inside here. And I'm also going to target with a comma the voice search button. So this one. So now this code is going to apply to both of these. So it saves us a little bit of code. Same thing down here. We're going to apply all of these styles to the search button tooltip and comma the voice search button dot tooltip. So using these advanced CSS selectors can save us a lot of code. I'm going to scroll down all the way here too and use a comma and set this to the voice dash search button. So make sure you don't have a comma at the end there. Save it. Now when I hover over this, you'll notice that it doesn't really work because the text is sort of wrapping around. I'm going to fix that by setting this property, white space, no wrap. Save it, and this will prevent the text from wrapping around. Now the last thing I want to do is to center this tooltip with the button. To do this, we can use we're going to fix that by really work because the text is sort of wrapping around. We're going to fix that by setting this property, white space, no wrap. Save it, and this will prevent the text from wrapping around. Now the last thing I want to do is to center this tooltip with the button. To To do this, we can use a flexbox, because remember with flexbox we can center horizontally and vertically. In this case we want to center horizontally. So we're going to scroll up and we're going to make these buttons flexboxes. So let's set display flex. By default it's flex direction row. So justify content is going to center horizontally. Justify content center. And save it. So now if we hover over our buttons, you'll notice that the tooltips are aligned horizontally. But you also notice that our icons are not vertically aligned very well. So let's go back into our code, and we're going to align them in the center with align-items: center. Save it. So that didn't seem to work, but if we scroll down into our code, so way earlier in the course we actually added margin top to the search icon as well as the voice search icon. So we just need to get rid of this margin top and let the flexbox handle the vertical centering. So if we save that, now the icons are perfectly centered, and if we hover over we have a centered tooltip. The tooltips for these icons are the same thing, except if we scroll down we currently just have an image. We're going to need a container like this that's going to act as our position relative container. So let's create a div that's going to contain our upload icon. Let's cut this and then paste it in here. Let's give a class of upload-icon-container. And then inside this container we're going to have our tooltip. So let's copy this and then paste it in here. And let's call this, let's look at our design, create. So our tooltip is going to have the text create. Next we're going to change this to position relative and position absolute inside. So let's scroll up, and we already have this code here that sets to position relative and centers everything. We're going to add to this the upload icon container dot upload-icon-container. Save it. And then we need a position absolute on this tooltip. So again, we can just add it in here so we don't have to copy all this code again. The comma dot upload-icon-container. dot tooltip. Save it. And lastly, we're going to scroll down and add it to here so that it appears when we hover. So let's set dot upload dash icon container and dot when we hover over it, the tooltip is going to have opacity of 1. Let's save it and hover over. Alright, so that looks pretty good. But let's change the font here. So let's go into this code, which sets our tooltip styles, and let's set the font dash family to Roboto, comma Arial, like before. We save it and we hover over it. Now we have a nice looking tooltip on our icons. So that's how we create these tooltips when we hover over these icons and these buttons. Creating tooltips for these two other icons are the same thing, and I'm going to leave it as an exercise for you to do on your own. So in this lesson, we finished up our final project. We created the sidebar, resized our videos, created the tooltips, and now if we compare it to our design, our project looks pretty much perfect and ready to go. So here's some exercises you can try on your own to wrap up everything that we learned in this course. On your own to wrap up everything that we learned in this course. Perfect. And ready bit to and dot upload dash like this to inside. So let's scroll up and we already have this code here. So let's scroll up is to position relative and position absolute inside. So let's scroll up and we already have this code here that sets to position relative and centers everything. We're going to add to this partner icon.
हाँ
चाय पी लो
हाँ दे दो
अदरक बोले
हाँ कम अदरक पर
We just need to get rid of this margin. Way earlier in the course, we had actually added margin down act as you to do the site everything that we learned in this course. In the previous lesson, which is this. In this lesson, I'm going to show you some more useful features of CSS. We're going to start off with responsive design. If we go to our reference design here, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can see, if I make the page smaller, you'll notice that we now have 2 videos in each row. If I make the page bigger, we have 4 videos. So notice that at every screen size, the layout adjusts so that the website looks good. So that's the idea of responsive design, making the website look as good as possible on every screen size. Now, if we make this a little bit more narrow and we switch to our current project, you'll notice that all of our content is sort of squished. So we're going to learn how to implement responsive design into our project. Let's go into our code, and we're going to open the file called video.css, which controls the video grid styles. Let's open that. And now inside, we're going to adjust our video grid so that when the screen size is small, we only have 2 videos per row, and when the screen size is big, we have more than 3 videos per row. So let's go into our code. We're going to scroll down and find the video grid styles. So notice that for these styles, we set 3 columns of equal size. Now to make this responsive, we're going to use something called a media query. So to create a media query, we're going to type @media, and then we're going to give it a screen size. So we're going to say max-width colon maybe 600 pixels. And then we're going to type open squiggly bracket and then close squiggly bracket. So the way this works is that we're going to have a bunch of CSS in here, and this CSS will only activate if the screen size is 600 pixels or less. That's what this max width means. So for example, let's target the video grid class inside here, and let's set the grid-template-columns to 1fr, 1fr. That means from a screen size of 0 to 600 pixels, we're only going to have 2 columns. So we save it, and we start to resize. Notice that once we get to 600 pixels, we now have 2 columns in our grid. Now to figure out how big our screen size is, we can right click and inspect, and I'm going to click these 3 dots and move it back down to the bottom like this. And now when we resize, you should see the screen size at the top right of the page. So it's really up to us to pick a screen size where we're going to go from 3 columns to 2. So I think even at this screen size, maybe at 750, it looks a little bit squished. So I'm going to increase this to 750 pixels. Save it. Now once we get to 750, we're going to have 2 videos in each row, and it's not going to be as squished anymore. So that's the basics of how to create responsive designs using these media queries. Let's do another example. We're going to have 4 videos per row when our screen size gets really big. So let's set another @media, and for this time we're going to set a minimum width of maybe 1000 pixels. And then inside here, we're going to copy this and paste it here. We're going to change grid template columns to 4 columns. So 1fr, 1fr. Now we save it, and we resize the browser a 1000 pixels, it's going to become 4 videos per row. Now you might need to press Command or Control minus to make the web page smaller to see this, but basically the way this works is that once the screen size hits 1000 pixels, this will activate and we have 4 columns instead of 3. So the last example is that we can actually combine these two. So we can set at media, and we can set the min dash width to 751 pixels and the max dash width to 999 pixels. So this will cover the space between these two measurements here. So let's actually put this in the middle. Okay, so from 0 pixels to a max of 750, we're going to have these styles. And then from 751 to 999, we're going to have these styles. We're going to set this to 3 columns. And then from 1000 and up, we're going to have 4 columns. So this is the basics of how to create a responsive design like this. You just have to write a lot of media queries. Alright, so that's the basics of responsive design. We're going to go back to our web pages. I'm just going to zoom back in, and we'll learn the next feature of CSS. So let's go to our project here, and open our code, and let's scroll down to this style. And we'll learn back to our web pages. I'm just going to zoom back in, and we'll learn the next feature of CSS. So let's go to our project here and open our code, and let's scroll down to this style, the video time. So the next feature we're going to learn is sort of like CSS shortcuts. So instead of setting padding on the left, right, top, and bottom separately like this, we can actually use a property called padding, which is sort of like a shortcut for all 4 of these. So we set the padding to 4 pixels. This is the same as setting padding on all 4 sides, so we don't need this code anymore. So it makes it a little cleaner for our code to use these shorthand properties. So another thing we can do with this is we can have 2 values. Let's say 4 pixels and 10 pixels. Let's save it. So this first value is going to be the vertical padding, so padding top, padding bottom, and the second value is horizontal padding, padding left and padding right. The next thing we can do is have 4 directions, so 20 pixels and 30 pixels. Let's see how that looks. So this is how we can set padding in all 4 directions using one line of CSS. This first value is the padding top, second value is the padding right, third value is padding bottom, and fourth is padding left. You can think of this as first you start from the top, and then you work your way clockwise around. So that's what these 4 values mean. Another shorthand property is margin. And this is a substitute for margin dash left, margin dash right, margin top, and margin bottom. So this margin shorthand property works the same way as padding. If we have 1 value, this is all 4 directions. If we have 2 values, this first value is the vertical direction, second is the horizontal direction, and if we have 4 values of margin, this is the top, right, bottom, and left. So these are just examples. We're going to move our styles back to 4 pixels of padding on every side. And we're going to look at one final shorthand property, which is the border. So let's go into our header CSS file and find these styles for this search bar. So we're going to scroll up until we find our search bar, which is here. And notice for our borders, we always set a width, a border style, and a border color. So instead of setting these styles separately, we can use a shorthand called border. So for border, we can set 1 pixel. This is going to be the width. We can set another value of solid. This is going to be the border style. And we can set the third value of color. And so this one line of CSS can replace these 3. If we delete that and we save, you can see that everything still appears normally and that's because this border property is a shorthand for the other three. The next thing we're going to learn is called inheritance. Let's go to our youtube.html file, and we're going to scroll down to the video grid, which is right here. So inheritance means that for certain CSS properties, if we set the property on the outer element, it will get passed down to the inner elements, like these. Let's do an example. We're going to set a property on the video grid. We're going to go to the video.css file, and we're going to find the video grid styles, which is all of these. We're going to set it on this style here, so we're going to set it for all screen sizes. Let's add a style. We're going to make the text underline. To do that, we're going to use this property, text-decoration: underline. Now if I save this, you'll see that even though I set text decoration underline on the video grid, all of the paragraphs inside have been underlined. So this is called inheritance. If we set this style on the outer element, which is the video grid, it gets passed down to all the inner elements, which are the paragraphs here. However, not all properties are affected by inheritance. For example, if we go back to the video.css file, and we're going to add a border this time. So let's add a border, and we're going to make it 2 pixels wide, a solid color, and let's just make it red. If I save that, you'll see that the video grid has a border around it, but this border is not passed down to the inner elements here. So inheritance mostly just works with text properties like text decoration, underline, color, font weight, and font family. It doesn't affect things like border, padding, property. We go back to the video.css file, and we scroll down. You can see that the video time uses a style called font family Roboto Arial. So this changes the font of our text. And instead of putting it on the video time, we'll just
That is straight. Black is with you.
No.
Yes, Elena.
Okay. Oh,
I'm going to put it on the entire grid, and then it will get inherited by all the elements inside,
I
which
don't
includes the
die.
video
What is
time.
this scam?
So I can scroll up the video
Oh,
grid.
you're not an offline.
You want to ask him anyway.
Hmm.
Hey,
What?
things which I'm working on.
How long?
10-15. Come sit with me.
Okay.
And I can set the font dash family up here. So I can set Roboto, comma, Arial. If I save this, you'll see that nothing changed with the video time, because you'll see that this video grid is actually contained within the entire body. So all of our elements on the page are contained on the bladder. And these paragraphs actually use a different set of styles. So if we go to the file called general.cping image of the inner elements. So using this, we can save more code. If we go to our sidebar and our header, if I go to the sidebar first, you'll notice that we're also using font family Roboto Arial. So we can simply get. Now let's get rid of these properties that we're using to test with. General color, sidebar, and a set a test window off, and by the styles that are inherited from the body. However, this style is more specific because it only targets specificity, this project. But you can find all the details about specificity in the HTML and CSS reference below the video. For now, let's go back into general.css and let's get rid of this practice style set of elements called semantic elements, the nav element. So these elements actually work the same way as a div, except they have a special meaning to screen readers, search engines, and any other kind of device or robot that is reading our web page. So to have the structure of our web page recognized correctly in a screen reader, we should actually replace some of our divs with semantic elements. So for example, we can remove this div and replace it with a header. So it works the same way as a div, except it's for the robots. So let's scroll down, we can turn this into a header, and then we can also scroll down to our sidebar, and we're going to change this to a nav element, because the sidebar on the real YouTube should help us navigate through the website. Another semantic element we can use is called main. So this should contain the main contents of your website, which for us is this.
Very, very hot.
We're going to move everything inside here to the main element. So I think it's this. I might be missing. Okay, so move all of that into main, and let's go back up. Now inside main, we're going to have a video grid, but we might also have other things below the video grid. So the video grid is known as a section of our main content. Let's save that and scroll all the way down to the end of our video grid and remove this with section. So that's how semantic elements work. They're just the same as divs, except they give a special meaning and structure to our page for search engines and screen readers. Now the final thing I want to show you in this course is how to write comments. So comments are pieces of code that the computer ignores, but you can read yourself to remind you of information or to tell yourself what's going on in the code. So for example, if we scroll up to our header, maybe I forgot how we created this tooltip. So we can actually add a comment in the code that reminds us. So let's add a comment here. I'm going to type less than, exclamation, dash dash. And we're going to end the comment with dash dash greater than, like this. So this is a comment. If I save the web page, you'll see that this text appears nowhere on the web page. And that's because the computer basically ignores comments. So we can add comments like put, position, absolute, inside, position, relative, to remind us that we need to put a position absolute inside position relative to create this tooltip. In CSS, we also have comments. So for example, we go here, we can write a comment by writing slash, star, and ending it with star slash. Now everything in between here is a comment. So we can say, this style below will be inherited. So as you can see, comments add extra information into our code without affecting our web page. So it's a really useful tool when you're working on a team to document how your code works. And now for everything in this course, if you ever forget, remember that you can always Google it. For example, if I go to Google, I can search things like Xbox and position, back into websites on your own. YouTube, here are some challenge exercises that you can do to create other popular websites on your own. YouTube, here are some challenge exercises that you can do to create other popular websites on your own. Thanks so much for taking this course with me. I hope you now realize that creating websites is not as intimidating as it seems. We just need to create
This guy's so good, dude.
Yay!
I did his 22-hour JavaScript course for free. And it's like, he has like exercise links and everything like set out.
And you know, it has 11 million views.
It deserves more.
You know how much money it makes from that?
Not much actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Like better than AdSense.
$12 million views is $6,000.
A month.
I don't think. No, it's not per month. The video doesn't pay you. The video pays you per views. He doesn't get a recurring check. From $6,000, you get off the video $10,000. It's really not much.
Yeah, because if he sold.
If he sold the same, he is selling a premium version of the course.
Yeah.
He's not that generous. He's just, I guess, half generous. I don't know. Okay. Whew. Yeah. Just take it. Trust. Watch. I've been trying to learn how to do this stuff, okay? Don't use it.
I'm not.
See?
What? How?
So I wanna. So I can text you. You can go here. Right. I can open this. I can open a file, right? I can give a command. Like for example, I don't need that anymore, right? So I'm just gonna close that, right? Then this I need to commit the changes. So Control Shift G, right? And then here, right? And then we do fetch get it's up to that commit sm completed the course with what is it, with tooltips है ना, and media queries. Okay, it's done now. Now I should just push this. Cool. See, it's doing it on its own. And I can close this, and then I come here. Now I go. Okay, I don't know about it for this one. Right, then here I don't need this. Okay, so I leave. Okay, and now I can go here. I can open Netflix. Like I can do whatever I want. Is my point. Cool, no?
Streaming.
Oh shit,